When the lock on unit number 25 was broken, the other bidders groaned and rolled their eyes, knowing it was a waste of time. The auctioneer rolled his eyes and simply went through the motions of attempting to sell a unit. Rules are rules. He couldn't skip it. As soon as the gate was lifted, a stench of moisture, soil, and musk assaulted our noses. From the look of it, there was nothing of value for flipping. There was no reason for me to bid on it. Yet for some reason I still cannot even explain, I did. At first, I dismissed it outright like the rest of them and waited. The auctioneer started the bids at $200 to the chuckles and murmurs of the crowd. The asking price plummeted to $50 after a minute of the auctioneer's rapid-fire offers. The inactivity broke at the $25 mark, when a gentleman lifted his hand into the air. As the auctioneer began the count, this overwhelming certainty there was something of value inside the unit hit me. It was all so strange. On the second count, I outbid the man. He smirked with a shrug and bowed out of the bidding. At the count of 3, unit number 25 was mine. I've regretted it ever since. Unit 25 never strayed far from my thoughts. The other units had no appeal despite showing some promising inventory to flip on eBay or Craigslist. There was an itch to get inside the unit, and it would drive me insane until it was scratched. When the rest of the auctions finished and it came time to pay, I practically threw the money at the cashier and ran back to the unit. Lifting the orange gate felt like scratching around the area of the itch, but not quite getting to the offending spot. In terms of monetary value, Unit 25 was a success. A Panasonic plasma television with a home theater system was hidden behind an old beige-colored couch, covered in dark brown stains. Those ensured my gamble paid off in spades. There were other valuables too, but I won't get into them. The majority of the unit was junk though. Pieces of a broken coffee table, a mattress covered in yellow sweat stains, at least I hoped they were sweat stains, and a bunch of other trinkets littered the unit. The drawers of an old desk called out to me like a beacon in a lighthouse. The certainty of something being in there nagged me again. The drawer creaked open, and inside was a bound leather book. It seemed to glow against the dim light in the unit. Sliding off the leather tie holding it shut, I felt a warmth flow through me from head to toe. It felt like bathing in a pool of freshly baked brownies. The single bulb lighting the unit brightened, like tossing a log into a fire. My vision blurred. I stumbled over, feeling faint all of a sudden, and dropped the journal on the floor to catch myself on the desk. Taking a precaution against passing out, I slid to the cold and dusty floor. The journal sat open on the floor next to me. It had opened to a page and a few words caught my attention. Flipping through the pages, back to the first entry, I began to read the following. Entry 1. Mrs. Wiselink lectured me about being loud and annoying to the other people around me. She went on this crazy tirade about hearing me argue with someone last night. I wasn't home last night is what I would have said if I managed to sneak a sentence between her endless rant. As soon as I started talking, she would interrupt me, complaining about slamming doors and loud laughter echoing down the hallways from my apartment at all hours of the night. When I was finally able to tell her that I slept at Brandy's apartment, the old hag frowned at me with that wrinkled, old face of hers and shook her head. That's when she really lost her shit. She called me a smelly liar and warned me that if I didn't keep everything quiet and orderly, my ass would be out on the street. I stated once again it wasn't me and suggested that she might have to talk to the people in the apartment next to mine. Her brows furrowed and she looked confused. Without another word, the old woman snatched the rent check from my hand and slammed the door in my face. Quiet and orderly, right? I wanted to shout through the door. There was one more issue I wanted to discuss, but she hadn't given me the chance. She had promised to call someone to cover up the weird spot on my wall. I don't know if it's mold or fungus, but it keeps getting bigger. My theory is that there's a small leak behind the wall, and the wet wallpaper is scrunching up into it. I don't know. Going through the trouble of getting her back to the door wasn't worth it. She would probably try to start up some trouble with me over it since she's got nothing better to do in her life than to train her cat to piss in the toilet. I can't wait to leave this shithole and move in with Brandy. On the walk back to my apartment, I heard the next door neighbors laughing it up through their apartment door. With these paper-thin walls, it was like having a never-ending party hosted in my apartment. I don't know how many people live there. Definitely not all of them are on the lease. They're constantly laughing, yelling, and talking to each other. I'm not even sure if they're speaking English half the time. I can't understand them. It's really irritating. I've knocked on their door a few times, but they never answer. I have slipped notes under their door, only to have them returned to me. The nights where it is especially bad, I've banged on the walls and shouted for them to keep it down. Sometimes they comply. Most of the time, all I get for my troubles is more jeering laughter. I can't wait to leave this shithole behind, counting down the days until the lease is done. Entry 2. Today was the day from hell. This morning I couldn't find my house keys or cell phone. I had to lock myself out of my house and ask Mrs. Wiseling to let me in later. She was the last person I wanted to speak with, but I couldn't just leave my apartment door open. I hoped to God that she would be awake when I got off my shift. Even if she wasn't awake, the crone had nothing to do the next morning, so she could sleep in. When I got into work, Warnett was standing right at the front door, smoking a cigarette and looking at his watch. I was half an hour late. When I tried to apologize and explain to him what happened, he waved me off with a disapproving eye roll that I have become accustomed to seeing from him lately. My sales numbers have plummeted the past 2 months, and Warnett was on the warpath about it. If that wasn't bad enough, every customer I tried to assist today seemed to be having a worse day than I was. Each person was more annoyed with me than the last. My best efforts to be friendly with them were met with even worse treatment. I considered the possibility that I was being pranked at one point. The tip of the iceberg was this old guy that was looking for a GPS upgrade card. Somehow I just knew that this was going to be the worst. I told him in the nicest way possible, "Sir, your GPS does not require an upgrade card." The man exploded. He went from a kindly old man to a purple-faced, irate berserker in less than a second. A sneer twisted into his face, and his eyes bulged from their sockets like they were going to pop out of his skull. He bared his teeth at me like some rabid animal about to attack. He berated me on the floor, drawing the attention of everyone in the entire store. For a second, I thought he was going to try to kill me. "How dare you try to deceive me, you smelly little shit! Get me a fucking manager, right now!" Warnett comes dashing over and screams for me to go into the break room, then attends to the old man. My face was burning with embarrassment. I was more than happy to walk off the sales floor, away from all the prying eyes of every employee and customer in the building. A few minutes later, Warnett charged into the break room to take his turn berating me too. The old man told Warnett that I had given him an attitude and lied to him about the GPS upgrade card. Then instead of trying to further assist him, apparently I pointed him in the direction of the automotive department and told him to find it himself. Warnett didn't even give me a chance to refute the old man's lies. He banished me into the warehouse, informing me that I was going to receive a disciplinary write-up. This, in combination with my sales numbers, was grounds for termination. It was complete and utter horseshit, and I couldn't do a damn thing about it. At the end of my shift, 2 of my coworkers told me that they had gotten some phone calls from me in the middle of the night. I told them that my phone had been misplaced, and it couldn't have been me. Maybe someone was reaching out to them to return it, or they had bad service. They said that no one spoke on the other end of the line. Both calls ended abruptly with a loud, high-pitched scream, and then silence. They tried to call back, and it went straight to voicemail. I apologized and promised to take care of the problem. I called Verizon right away and asked customer service to disconnect the phone. They struck me with some ridiculous fees, which I was forced to agree to in order to shut the phone line down. Warnett then comes into the warehouse and sees me on the phone. He looks like he's about to lose it. He tells me he needs me to stay until closing. I agreed to the shift to avoid pissing him off any further. With a 12-hour shift ahead of me, I asked him if I could take a half-an-hour break to get dinner, and Warnett responded, "You think you deserve more time off the clock than you've already taken today? Un-fucking believable." You were late this morning, and you royally pissed off that old man too. I think you've used up all your breaks for today." The asshole then turned around, leaving through the double doors back onto the sales floor. I didn't sell today. My dollars per hour generated were fucked, and I stayed until 11 o'clock at night, starving and feeling like shit. The last thing I wanted to deal with was asking Mrs. Weisling to let me inside my own apartment. I'm falling asleep right now, but I'll say knocking on her door and asking her to help me went about as pleasant as having someone kick me in the balls with steel-toed boots about a half a dozen times. I need a new apartment. I need a new job. I need a new life. Fuck all this shit. Entry 3. Murphy's Law is a bitch. Someone broke into my apartment. Everything not bolted to the ground was broken into pieces and tossed around the apartment. Unless Spider-Man decided to turn to a life of breaking and entering, there is no way someone could have come in through the window. There were no signs of forced entry, at least none that I can find. Nothing was stolen either. Everything was just demolished. With my phone still missing, I couldn't call the police. It hasn't turned up anywhere, and Verizon still hasn't deactivated it yet. More of my coworkers were getting phone calls now. That's a whole other bag of shit I'm dealing with though. I bolted over to the apartment next door and knocked. No one answered, despite hearing their roaring laughter in the hallway before I opened the door to my ransacked apartment. After about 5 minutes of knocking and shouting that it was an emergency, I gave up on them, forced to ask Weisling to use her phone. I knocked on her door, and the hallway filled with laughter again. What a bunch of dicks. Mrs. Weisling answered the door with the same sour look on her face from the last time she slammed the door on me. I told her about my situation, and I asked if I could use her phone. The bitch actually seemed conflicted about it. I mean, for God's sake, she may not like me for whatever reason, but a phone call to the police isn't any skin off her back. She let me in, after literally having me get on my hands and knees to beg to use her phone. I'll never forget the smell of cat piss, musk, and cooking spices permeating the apartment. Breathing through my mouth was the only saving grace I had while speaking with the dispatcher. They said someone would be over immediately. It was the first time in days that someone had actually treated me like a human being. I nearly teared up at the display of basic human kindness. After hanging up, I turned to thank the old lady and was rewarded with the urge to vomit instead. She had sat down in a chair and spread eagle with no underwear on. What made it worse was that she was in the middle of taking her teeth out of her mouth and putting them into a glass jar. Thank you," I shouted, and ran out of there so fast I felt like I had teleported. When the officers arrived, they seemed bothered to be there. They didn't seem to care about anything I said beyond getting the information they needed to fill out their paperwork. Both of them kept clearing their throats, as if they had smelled something bad in the air. Mrs. Weisling made it worse by coming to my apartment. She gasped and began howling about how the carpet was filthy. I had no idea what she was talking about until I looked over her shoulder and saw a path of brown footprints smeared from the door leading across the living room carpet to my couch, then up the wall to where the spot had been. The damn thing had only gotten bigger. It wasn't going to be my problem once I left, so I didn't bother chasing the old bitch around trying to get it fixed. They hadn't been there when I first came in. It made no sense. In the time that I had been out, someone must have snuck back inside. Instinct told me that it was the neighbors, since they were the only ones around. They had broken in. It was the only explanation. My thoughts were interrupted by Mrs. Weisling's insistence that I pay for a new carpet, since I was too stupid to lock my doors before I went out. Lucky for her, the policemen were there. Otherwise, I may have strangled her. We looked over the apartment and nothing was missing. Mrs. Weisling looked inside from the doorway and scoffed at me. She huffed and puffed so much about the muddy carpet that I considered actually punching her in the face. The police officers finished their report and looked happy to leave the apartment to ask the neighbors if they had heard anything. Most of the other tenants in the building weren't home during the day. The ones who were home said they hadn't heard anything. They knocked on my neighbor's door, and no one answered. This is where shit got weird. Wiselink told them not to bother knocking on that door since no one lived there. Lady, you are freaking senile. It came out of my mouth in an instant. All eyes turned to me once again. Wiselink looked like she was about to have a stroke. The officers looked at me like someone looked at dog shit they just stepped in. It was like work all over again. I apologized right away and told them that it was the stress. One of the officers coldly asked me to sign my statement and left without another word. Wiselink stood at the door, shook her head, and said something under her breath before leaving. I could have sworn it was the word psycho. I shut the door as they left, then slumped down against the door, slowly letting myself fall to the ground. I then began bawling my eyes out. Once I stopped sobbing, I dragged myself over to the refrigerator for a beer. The craving to have one was so bad, I could taste it. When I pulled the door open, the hinges moaned, and the door crashed to the floor. A disaster of beer, food, and condiments mixed with glass covered the floor. There was nothing else to do but laugh. The neighbors thought it was okay to join me. I wanted to slam my fist into the wall. I wanted to tell them to shut up, but I didn't have the energy. Suddenly a scream rang out from the other side. It was unintelligible, but no one made a sound after that. The silence was welcoming, but I couldn't stand to be there for one more minute. The safety of my home was compromised. There was no comfort in staying there anymore. Brandy was my only option. She was surprised to see me when I showed up at her apartment. She looked very well put together, like she was about to go out on a date or something. I asked if she had plans for the night and explained the situation to her. She said that she was going to see some friends for dinner, but she could cancel. I could tell that she was annoyed, but I didn't have the energy to apologize any more than I already had. I told her to go, but she canceled on them and stayed in with me for the night. It took a long time for me to fall asleep. Each time I closed my eyes, images of my ruined apartment flashed before me. I muffled my cries with a pillow so I wouldn't wake Brandy. I really fucking hate my life. Entry 4. I'm so happy to be back in my apartment. If I had to stay with Brandy another day, I think I would have choked her to death in her sleep. It's perplexing because everything started off so nicely between us. We woke together, made breakfast, went to work, and came home to each other's company. After the second day, things got weird. Brandy would get annoyed with me for no reason and start fights. She even complained that I smelt like milk that had gone bad, or something fucking juvenile like that. I would try to defuse the situation, but she would lay into me with whatever was on her mind. By the time I left her place, my desire to be with her was gone. We'll be breaking up soon. This whole experience opened my eyes to who she really is. I don't want to be with someone who treats their significant other as badly as she treated me. I couldn't take the abuse anymore, and I came back here despite feeling unsafe. As soon as I opened the door, the smell of rancid pickles, old beer, and olive juice stung my nostrils. My first order of business was to clean the place up. It took almost the entire day to get it back into tolerable conditions. The only good news to report so far is that my renter's insurance covered a good portion of the items that had been broken. Strangely, the whole process went without a hitch. The gentleman on the phone was pleasant and helpful, nothing like Verizon. All I needed to do was to take an inventory of what was broken, send them a copy of the police report, and wait for the check to arrive in the mail. It was so nice to finally have someone treating me like a person again. The only issue needing to be resolved was my cell phone. It was still connected somehow after being reassured several times that it was turned off by Verizon. The complaints at work about me calling everyone were getting out of hand. No one gave me the benefit of the doubt anymore. Everyone seemed incredibly hostile to me, and even confronted me about horrible threats I had made against them. I flipped the fuck out on a couple of customer service reps for lying to me. They passed me to a manager who treated me very kindly, and assured me that they were going to resolve the situation. He even offered to credit my account for the weeks that my phone had still been activated. Even though the manager was nice, someone needed to be held responsible and face the consequences of their ineptitude. The only thing the manager could say was the phone had been disconnected from use the first day I reported it. I calmly assured him that if one more person tells me about obscene phone calls coming from my number, I would fly over to India or whatever godforsaken shithole he lived in and murder his entire family in front of him. He cursed me in whatever gibberish language he spoke and hung up the phone. The neighbors are still at it. I thought about calling the police on them, but reconsidered, seeing how those pig shits treated me the last time. Those fuckers never sleep. Banging on the walls and yelling at them to shut their traps doesn't work. One of these days, I'm going to get a sledgehammer and break down the wall between us so they have no place to go. I'll hit it right in the middle of that stupid fucking spot on the wall. I can't miss it now. It's huge. WiseLink is going to take my entire deposit. Maybe the sledgehammer will change her mind when the time comes. I've knocked on the neighbor's door and they don't answer. I challenge them to come out and fight me. I feel their eyes on me through the peephole. They giggle behind the door. All the gods in human history won't be able to save them if I ever catch them outside the apartment. Now that I think about it, I wouldn't even know what they looked like, even if I did see them. I've never seen their faces. They could walk right by me on the street, and I wouldn't know. They knew who I was. We could be in the same elevator, street, or walkways, and I would be the schmuck not knowing it was them. They could come home and tell their little friends about the idiot next door not knowing. The thought simultaneously pissed me off and freaked me out. Work is intolerable. My coworkers seem to be actively avoiding me. I caught a few of the girls spraying perfume into the air in the places where I had been standing, or in the break room after I would leave. Customers aren't approaching me for help either. I get paid regardless of my sales, so that's fine by me. Warnet has been on my case about my numbers. Same shit, different day. Fuck 'em all. Entry 5. I got fired today. Warnet canned me for threatening and harassing my coworkers over the phone. I explained to the overpaid, self-righteous asshole in the most simplest of words that I didn't have a phone which to make these calls, hence, I am not at fault. He turned his computer and clicked the mouse twice, and my voice came over the speakers of his computer. In the shock of the moment, I didn't really pay attention to what my voice actually said. What I do remember was actually in the background of the recording. There was laughter, hooting and hollering with each vile word that was spewed from my mouth. The recording finished with a high-pitched screech, and the line went dead. Warnet's voice pulled me back from the shock and utter insanity of the situation. He droned on about how the recordings had been forwarded to human resources after several employees came forward with more recordings and refused to come to work if I was still allowed inside the building. He said I should be thankful that they weren't going to get the police involved, as if he was doing me some sort of favor. It was human resources and corporate avoiding the additional paperwork and the possibility of litigation. Everyone was probably convinced not to press charges against me. Warnet handed me a termination notice with a shit-eating grin plastered across his acne-cratered face. I've never seen a man jump as high as he did when my fist slammed against his desk. It sort of scared me too. He tensed up and went quiet. His grin was replaced with wide-eyed fear. Holding the arms of my chair in a vice grip stopped me from reaching over the table and throwing a stapler into his face. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Everything was black and red. The words coming from my mouth didn't feel like mine. There was a disdain and malice in them. My stomach churned. I felt disgusting. Each syllable was like fecal matter and pus. I told him to expect human resources to take a closer look at his management decisions. Egregious amounts of time were spent outside smoking with his employees. Time theft was a serious offense to my former employer. Corporate didn't take kindly to wasted time. There was also the matter of his infamous out-of-the-box deals going on with his best customers, who were also related to him. The percentage off on items was equivalent to stealing. There was also a recent hire receiving a promotion over veteran employees. The appropriateness of their relationship outside of work may have had something to do with the promotion. Warnet's face looked like a cooked lobster. He didn't even respond. He picked up the phone and had our loss prevention department escort me out of the building. As they tossed me out of the building, a laugh escaped my throat. It rolled like a cartoon snowball down a hill into a full-blown laughing fit. I cursed at the customers and former co-workers staring at me. I told them they should take their business elsewhere, since this company hires smelly, crazy people that harass and threaten their co-workers. I don't have a job anymore. It feels fucking great. Entry 6. This isn't a complaint in the slightest, but I've been on a short fuse lately. Everyone gives me shit all the time, and I stand by taking it like a bitch. Those days are done and over. I'm nobody's doormat. No one crosses me, or they'll discover the consequences of their actions. Too many people for far too long have treated me like nothing. It stops here and now. Mrs. Wiselink learned her lesson today. I paid the old crotch her rent money. There was fear in her eyes. A fake smile was plastered on her face. She was trying not to breathe. I asked if she smelled something funny. She shook her head no. I demanded she evict the neighbors, because I was going to strangle them with their intestines if she didn't. She smiled and nodded at me while closing the door. She didn't slam it in my face again. I would have throttled her if she did. I could tell she was afraid of me. I liked it. I liked it a lot. Entry 7. Brandy showed up today for the infamous talk. She wanted to end our relationship, saying that I was the one who changed into a different person. My blood boiled worse than when I fought with Warnet. She started all the fights. She was the one who changed for the worse. It was her fault I didn't want to be around her. She knew her reasoning was bullshit. In the final moments of our relationship, she confirmed at the top of her lungs that she had been fucking several other guys while she had been with me. The reaction from the neighbors was mixed. Half of them laughed hysterically. The other half booed and jeered. Her onslaught of insults didn't stop there. She called me a pathetic excuse for a man. Everyone could walk all over me. I never stood up for myself. Shit like that. The neighbors hooted and hollered like never before. They were getting a huge shit kick out of all of it. Then everything went red. My memory of what happened is hazy at best. A table lamp found itself in my hand. I flung it to the wall. Brandy dodged it before it shattered against the wall right behind her. If she didn't duck in time, it would have nailed her right in her slutty face. The neighbors hollered. The spot on the wall seemed to ripple like a pond. I don't think she heard them. She didn't see the spot. Brandy rose from the ground with her hands held in front of her in surrender, then scrambled out of the front door, her cries drowned out by the rigorous applause from the neighbors. The apartment shook. Everything went silent after that. The only sound I heard was the air conditioner in the background. Then there was a single "ha ha" from next door. The next 20 minutes were spent throwing everything in my apartment against the spot on the wall. When there was nothing left, kicks and punches sufficed. Nothing in the world was going to keep me from getting inside their apartment and killing them all, except collapsing on the floor in a heap of misery and exhaustion. I shouldn't have done that. I felt like I needed to apologize to Brandy for throwing the lamp at her. I wanted to tell her how sorry I was. Vomit rose in the back of my throat. My thoughts aren't mine. I'm not like this at all. Brandy was right. I'm not me anymore. Entry 8. This heat is unbearable. The fever is much worse. Nothing helps break it. Haven't slept in days. Insane nightmares. I'm in a sweat pool. I don't remember anything about dreaming. Hushed voices whisper to each other. It feels like there are people in here. My heart is racing. I'm terrified. I'm helpless. They scream at me and each other. Violent threats, laughter, snickering. They sound like Warnet. No balls. Brandy. Bitch. Wiselink. Dent your face. They sound like me. I am screaming? Wiselink tells me to stop screaming. It's annoying the neighbors. Got him. Laffy taffy assholes. It's annoying her too. She says there aren't any neighbors. The apartment is empty. Dumbass. I don't believe her. They're loud. She wants me out. I don't appreciate it. Look at the hole. I live there. People in there. They stand by my bed. I reach out to touch them. They aren't there. Entry 9. I found my phone. The neighbors had it. They took pictures. Brandy's body twisted in unfathomable directions at the bottom of some stairs. Smile. Swipe left. Wiselink's face is blue. The cat licked crusted food off her face. Her toothless mouth hung open. Her teeth were in her lap. Giggle. Swipe left. Warnet's face is burned. A steering wheel jammed into his abdomen. He looked surprised. Ta-da! Laugh. Phone shuts off. Shadows surround them. Shadows surround me. The voices laugh. The voices scream. No sleep, no dreams. The building is shaking. The neighbors are in the hole. I'm burning up. No. I'm cold again. They're laughing again. I'm laughing with them. The rest of the pages were unintelligible. Whoever wrote the journal tried to continue. His handwriting turned to scribbles and the pages were stained with black smudges. My dizziness from earlier had passed around entry 5. There was no way to stop reading it. 3 hours had passed. Everyone else from the auction was already gone, leaving me in the eerie silence of the storage building. It was time to head home too. A conversation with my wife over the phone made the ride go quick. I needed someone to talk to. I didn't want to think about the madness between those pages of the journal. We talked about the stuff inside unit number 25, except for the journal and its insane ramblings. My wife spooks pretty easy when it comes to stuff like that. She would feel uneasy keeping the belongings inside our house. What she doesn't know won't hurt her. When I arrived home, I found my wife in the kitchen making dinner. For the past 20 years, when I got home, the first thing I did was find my wife and give her a kiss. In 20 years, she has never rejected me. She was always happy to see me. Always wanted to kiss, hug, and touch. Walking into the kitchen to say hello, she turned in my direction and a frown stretched across her lips. I thought nothing of it until she turned her face away from me in disgust. She brought her hand to her nose and pushed me away. She then complained that I smelt like rancid milk.
There's always a reason to be afraid.